Good evening. We will now rise from closed session. Councillor Hamilton, you have the motion to rise. Please read it in its entirety.
I think it's Councillor Cooper.
No, sorry.
Okay, to rise from closed session, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Reid. The council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session at 6:31 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Upon coming out of closed discussions occurred with council and staff related to labor relations and employee negotiations, and staff were provided with direction. That didn't read right. Vote, yes, sorry, I almost forgot the vote. The clerk will now take the vote.
Starting the vote. And closing the vote. And that carries unanimously.
Good evening. My name is Jan Liggett, Mayor and Chair of this evening's council meeting. Before we begin, I would like to provide you with a safety notice for those of you with us in council chambers. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate using the nearest exit staircase. If you require assistance, please see our clerk staff for further assistance. And I ask that you gather outside of City Hall in the Farmers Market parking lot and await further instructions. I would like to thank everyone for attending this evening's meeting, both in person and virtually. As a reminder, City of Cambridge Council meetings are broadcast on the City of Cambridge YouTube page and archived on the city's website. Please note that we have rules of engagement during council meetings, and I ask that you be respectful while the others are speaking, refrain from any demonstrations, and I encourage you to actively listen to others. It is my pleasure to introduce council this evening. Councillor Reid, Councillor Kimpson, Councillor Devine, Councillor Earnshaw, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Armetta. We will now move forward with the singing of the national anthem. So if you are able, please rise and sing the national anthem. So next week, council will all be tested for the best singing voice so that we don't, when we have technical glitches, we can just do it on our own. For those of you joining both in person and watching from home, we wish to be as transparent as possible. As such, we will display the results of the vote for your review. All votes will be recorded by way of showing on the display the outcome of each vote. For staff and delegates alike, please be sure that you stand 6 to 8 inches from the microphone at the presenter's podium for optimal sound quality. And as a reminder to council, please speak clearly into your microphones and remember to turn off your mic when you finish speaking. If members of the public wish to participate in meetings of council, you may do so by signing up ahead of time and completing the online delegation request form, which can be found on the city's webpage. Delegates may address an item of interest in person, by written submission, including email, or by Zoom. If we learned anything from the pandemic, we must reconsider how local governments allow for public participation. Using a variety of methods, we offer you, the residents of Cambridge, the ability to contribute your thoughts, feelings, and opinions to issues that matter most to you. Keeping that in mind, our November 29th council meeting has had 268 views on YouTube. We did not have delegations at our November meeting. I encourage everyone at home to get involved in local government as we have a shared duty to keep Cambridge a place for all to prosper. For those of you who are watching our meetings from home via YouTube, if you require captioning during our session, there is a closed captioning button marked CC on YouTube that will provide captioning services for meetings of council. And this is extremely important because we've all seen how closed captioning can go wrong sometimes. Please note that the captioning service is not controlled or managed by the City of Cambridge, but it is a service offered by YouTube that hopefully our residents can use. Without further ado, let's move forward with the agenda for tonight. I'd like to start with thanking the city staff we have joining us tonight. Our city manager, David Calder, our deputy city managers, Cheryl Zanleiter, Harding Broadberg, and Yoga Shah over on this side of the room, our chief financial officer, Cheryl Ayers, our chief planner, Lisa Prime, our new city solicitor, Brian Boudhou, and our director of communications, Julie Kalfleisch, over on this side of the room. Additionally, we have staff from other divisions joining us this evening that will participate when their item is up for discussion. The clerk for tonight's meeting is our city clerk, Danielle Manton. Joining her from the clerk's department is Jennifer Shaw, deputy city clerk, Michael Oliveri. I've lost my place here, I'm sorry. And Maria Barrantes-Barreto, council committee services coordinators. And Rachel Latour, clerk's administrative assistant. And always a special thank you to our technology services staff who are assisting with logistics for tonight's meeting. We embrace our shared responsibility with the Indigenous peoples to take care of this earth and its creatures. We can only do so by walking the path as partners stewarding this land, as we have been given the duty together to live in balance and harmony with all living things. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples who came before us and who we live amongst. By honoring this truth of past and present, may we come to true reconciliation through listening, reflecting, and learning. So a reminder to members of council that Municipal Conflict of Interest Act requires members of council to declare any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to a matter under consideration. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? None? Okay, so seeing none, we will move forward with our agenda for today. So our first item for consideration this evening is the consent agenda. Please note that if a member of council wishes to comment on any of the consent items, let us know by requesting to speak. We will vote on the consent procedure with one motion in the interest of time. I have already pulled item number 10 because I feel that the public needs to see and hear what that is about rather than believing that we're just increasing taxes. So I've asked, so that's item number 10-11-22. 0612023, and we will address that as a separate motion once the vote for the consent agenda has taken place. So Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Could you please read it in its entirety?
Moved by me, seconded by
Cooper, that all remaining items listed under the heading of consent agenda for December 13, 2022 council agenda be adopted as recommended. 10.1 council minutes, November 29, 2022. 10.2 council information package, December 2, 2022. 10.3 Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes, June 27, 2022 and November 28, 2022. 10.4 22-121-CD 155 Equestrian Way, lifting of reserve. 10.5 22-110-CD request to designate 119 Blair Road under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for its cultural heritage significance. 10.6 22-109-CD request to alter a Part 4 designated property, 71 Cowan Boulevard, Duncan Ferguson Homestead. 10.7 22-075-CRS supply and delivery of one medium-duty roll-off chassis and landscape box. 10.8 22-069-CRS Ed Newland pool renovations. 10.9 22-129-CD part lot control exemption 270 to 290 Equestrian Way, River Mill Development Corporation. 10.10 22-144-CD part lot control exemption, Faith Street, Gemini Homes.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Does any member of council wish to have any other item pulled? Okay, and any comments on any item on the consent agenda? Okay, I will ask the clerk to display voting for members and the results of the vote will follow.
Starting the vote. And closing the vote. And that carries unanimously.
So if we could have Cheryl Ayers up to, or no, you can stay there if you'd like, if that's easier for you, Cheryl. And if you could explain what that item that was pulled is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry about the delay. The interim tax levy bylaw is a bylaw that comes to council each year. As per section 317 of the Municipal Act, the city is permitted to levy taxes based on the tax rate that was in effect for the previous year in order to collect taxes for cash flow purposes to meet our needs for expenses for the coming year and deliver our services and programs. So the way that it's outlined in the Municipal Act is we have the authority to levy up to 50% of the total amount of taxes that were levied in the previous year so that we can, as I say, collect the funding that we need in order to deliver our programs and services. So that is strictly for cash flow purposes to give the city the funding needed. And it is at the rate that was in effect as per the 2022 tax levy. So it does not include the tax levy, any tax levy increase that might be proposed through the 2023 budget. This gives us flexibility to levy the taxes until the budget is proposed. And we bring forward to you, typically in May, our final tax levy bylaw for the full year's worth of taxes. Does that help to explain it? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Pardon me. So you are? Yeah. Okay. The clerk's going to read the motion. And it will be moved by Councillor Mehta, I believe, and seconded by Councillor Cooper. Okay.
Moved by Councillor Mehta, seconded by Councillor Cooper, recommendation that report 22061 CRS 2023 interim tax levy be received and that the interim tax levy bylaw be passed.
And I will now call for the clerk to display the voting for members and the results of the vote.
Opening voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Now we will move into consideration of reports. Our first agenda item is item number 11.1.1, report 22-074 CRS, council appointments to advisory committee. So this item was deferred from November 29th to December 13th to provide members of council with the opportunity to review citizen committee mandates and share their preferences for committee and groups they wish to advise. Please note that there was a change to council appointments. Councillor Hamilton is now on the Environmental Committee and Councillor Cooper will sit on the Cultural Awards Committee. Councillor Mehta, you have the motion. Kindly read it in its entirety.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. The recommendation that report 22-074 CRS council appointments to advisory committees be received and that Appendix A council appointments to advisory committees be approved. And I would like to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mehta. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say that I'm supportive of all the appointments. And I certainly can handle both being budget chair and planning chair. I've gone through 12 city budgets and I've learned a lot about the budget process over the years. And I'm also in constant communication with my counterparts in other municipalities, learning about what they've been able to do with their budgets, as well as sharing the good things that we've been able to do here. And I've also got a lot of experience in urban planning. I have a diploma in urban and regional planning from Mohawk College, as well as a degree in planning from the University of Waterloo. And I've given up 5 committees as well, so I certainly have the time that's required to put a lot of work into these 2 appointments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mehta. I just want to say something. I thank all of you for stepping up to the plate and being on the different committees of council. It's very important that you do that and that you show the public that you are involved in the community. And I'm happy with all of your choices. I think they have been good ones. So I'm going to open the floor to any other comments or questions. Okay, seeing none, I will ask the clerk to display the voting for members and the results of the vote will follow.
Opening the voting. And closing the voting. And that carries unanimously.
So the next item on the agenda is item 11.3.1, report 22-118-CD, Hesper Village Core Area Parking Study. So this evening we have Kevin DeLiebeck, Director of Engineering with us, as well as, I'm going to butcher this one, Ronak Sarbarwal, and if that person could please correct me and teach me how to say that properly. And Jamie Garcia from CIMA Plus Engineering joining us virtually to provide a presentation. Welcome to both of you.
Through the mayor to members of council, SEMA Plus was retained by the city to undertake the Hespeler Village Core Area Parking Study, of which primarily focused on assessing the existing parking supply and the potential future parking demand within the Hespeler Core Parking Area. They have prepared a presentation, so I would ask if they could be brought into the meeting at this time.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Great. So I'm just going to share the screen. Okay, thank you. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Ronak Sabharwal, and I'm a transportation engineer at SEMA Plus. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Jaime Garcia, and we'll be sharing with you the summary of the results from the Hespeler Village Core Area Parking Study. If you go to the next slide. Yes. So the outline for what I'll be talking about today is presented here. So first, I'll quickly go over the study objectives. Then I'll provide a summary of the existing and projected parking operations results. Then I'll speak about the accessibility of public parking lots and the results of the public consultation survey. As well, lastly, I'll also go over some high-level recommendations to manage the parking demand within the study area. So on the next slide, please. So the objective of the study was to do a comprehensive evaluation of the parking needs and infrastructure serving the Hespeler Village downtown core area. This was done via public consultation, the physical parking supply assessment, the estimating of parking demand, the existing parking demand, as well as projecting future parking demand and potential supply. And so based off of these analysis, a set of recommendations for better access and parking demand management were provided. So in terms of the existing parking supply and demand, you can go to the next slide. Yes, so in terms of the existing parking supply and demand, currently there are 294 total parking spaces available within the core area, which are spread across 3 off-street parking areas. So the Hespeler Library parking lot, the St. James Church parking lot, and the Queen Street West parking lot, as well as 9 on-street parking areas along Queen Street, Sheffield Street, Spring Street, Milling Road, and Tannery Road. The current parking demand, which was calculated in accordance with IT Parking Generation Manual, provides a conservative estimate of the existing parking demand within the study area to be 224. This was calculated using the existing land use of the study area. This is less than the effective parking supply, which was calculated to be 250 parking spaces, which represents the high utilization threshold of 85% of the total parking spaces available within the study area. So based on the demand estimated and the current supply, it was deemed that there's sufficient parking available for the existing parking demand. The next slide, please. And in addition to the estimation of parking demand, we also conducted parking utilization surveys in April and May of 2022 to observe what the overall utilization of parking was within this study area. So what we found was that the utilization of the off-street and on-street parking areas are below the 85% threshold of high utilization. So meaning that for majority of the parking spaces in the study area, there's more than 15% parking spaces available. The only parking area where the parking utilization exceeded the 85% threshold was Queen Street. So for that, we'll provide some mitigation strategies later on in the presentation to potentially shift the demand from the high utilization corridor to the lesser utilized parking areas where the parking is readily available. Lastly, it should be noted that the average parking duration exceeded the parking time limit at Queen Street West parking lot, Hespeler Library parking lot, the Sheffield Street and Queen Street on-street parking area based on the results of this survey. Next slide, please. So as part of the future parking assessment, we looked at two future mid-rise developments that were identified by the city within the study area, which are shown here. So one is 16 Queen Street West, and the other one is 12 Tannery Street. And these were evaluated to see the impact of these developments on the public parking demand. Based on the private parking supplied by both of these developments for their residents and visitors, there's not expected to be any significant impact on public parking operations as a result of these two developments, as the parking supplied adheres to the city's bylaw requirements, as well as the IT parking generation manual thresholds. Next slide, please. To evaluate the potential impact on future parking demand as a result of further intensification of the study area in the future, as well as the impact of the Bill 23, the province's Bill 23, the following growth forecast scenarios for the Hespeler Village core area were reviewed. The base case, which is represented by the 0.3% growth rate scenario, was used since that's what the city used in their existing TMP, as well as for sensitivity analysis, we looked at higher growth rates of 0.6, 0.9, and 1.2%. The 1.2% representing the highest growth rate that we evaluated. So as you can see from this plot, for all scenarios, the existing parking supply is adequate until 2029. So that means like the existing parking supply, the demand does not exceed the effective parking supply of 250 vehicles, parking spaces. For the 0.3%, which is the base case scenario, the existing parking supply is adequate until 2041. For 0.6% growth rate scenario, it's adequate until 2038. For 0.9%, it's adequate until 2032. And for 1.2%, which is the highest growth rate scenario, the existing parking supply is adequate until 2029. And for this scenario, by 2041, the forecasted parking demand is expected to exceed the effective capacity by 38 spaces in the 1.2% scenario. So next slide, please. So an assessment of the 25 Queen Street East parking lot, which is currently used as an informal parking area, was conducted to evaluate the feasibility of potentially converting it into a formal municipal parking lot, as it is close to the downtown core and provides 10 parking spaces. The city had previously received numerous inquiries about this property to be potentially converted to a municipal lot. Based on our review, the property dimensions do not meet the city's design standards for an accessible municipal parking lot, as it has a very narrow access, which does not provide simultaneous entering and exiting of vehicles into the parking lot, as you can see from the street view here. As well as the parking lot itself is unpaved. The entrance is obstructed by a gazebo, so it restricts the sight lines of the drivers entering and exiting the area. As well as there's insufficient space for parking maneuverability within the parking lot. So as such, it is not recommended that the city convert this property into a formal parking lot at this point. A cost-benefit analysis should be conducted to evaluate whether the cost of retrofitting the parking lot to meet the city's design standards should provide sufficient public benefit. Next slide. So in the previous slides, I've mentioned that the additional parking supply is not required at this point, but in the future there may be some need for it, depending on how the population and the traffic in the area grows. So it is recommended that the city conduct a cost-benefit analysis to evaluate the cost of buying or leasing properties within the study area, preferably closer to the city core center, to be used as municipal parking areas in the future. A few potential locations were reviewed that the city may want to consider to increase their municipal parking supply in the future. Those include 10 Guelph Avenue, which has potential of about 32 parking spaces. 7 Queen Street West, which is about 20 spaces, 311 Queen Street East, which is about 10 spaces, and 42 Tannery Street property, which has about 50 parking spaces. Next slide, please. So in addition to the existing and the future parking supply and demand that was reviewed, we also conducted an accessibility review of the current off-street municipal parking lots within the study area. The parking lot design features were compared against the thresholds listed in the city's facility accessibility design manual. As a result of that, we found that all of the parking lots require an access aisle adjacent to the existing accessible parking stalls that are currently in each of these parking lots, as well as a type B accessible parking stall should be installed in Hespeler Library parking lot. A type A parking stall should be installed in the St. James Church parking lot. Additionally, the current running and crossing slope of the parking lot exceeds the design manual's thresholds. Hence, parking lot should be regraded to reduce those slopes, especially near the accessible parking stalls. Next slide, please. In addition to the data-driven approach of this report, we also conducted a public user survey to evaluate the public sentiment towards the parking availability within the study area. This was done in June and July of this year. So the two major factors that were identified in selecting a parking spot for visitors were parking availability and the proximity to the destination, which was reflected in their answers for the survey. So more than 90% of the visitors would prefer a parking spot within 5 minutes of their destination. More than 75% of the visitors are not willing to pay a nominal fee to park closer to the destination. And 60% of the visitors selected dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with the parking availability within the study area. So based on the utilization survey and the demand estimation that I shared earlier, we see that there's sufficient parking available within the study area. So instead of additional parking supply, the city should develop strategies to shift the demand from the highly utilized parking areas, especially along Queen Street, to low utilization parking areas to ensure that the visitors can readily find available parking within the study area. Next slide, please. So some of the strategies that the city can look into to potentially shift the parking demand from highly utilized areas to lesser utilized areas is engaging communities via community-based marketing. So as an example, the city could develop a series of social media campaigns to promote different modes, using active transportation, transit to access the Hespeler Village instead of cars. They can also provide usable travel information, such as placing potentially billboards or variable messaging signs that guide people to use parking locations where there's parking spaces available within the core, as well as the city can provide real-time parking and travel information on the city's website. The city can also incentivize the use of alternative travel modes to access the area, which can be done by a combination of infrastructure improvements as well as incentivization. So for infrastructure improvements, the city could look at improving the walkability within the study area, prioritizing transit movement within the area, providing rentable bikes or e-scooters for the last mile for the patrons of the area. As well as the city can also look into providing subsidized transit passes to the business tenants, workers in the area to promote the use of alternative modes, as well as the city can coordinate with local businesses to provide customers with incentives to use these alternative modes. So as an example, a local restaurant could provide a free beverage to a customer if they show a bike helmet or a used transit pass ticket, a pass or a ticket. As well, the city should review its parking enforcement strategies. As noted earlier, the average duration time of vehicles parked exceeds the permitted time at multiple parking locations. So the city can evaluate the enforcement strategies to ensure that the highly utilized parking areas are being properly, the vehicles that are properly adhering to the parking time limits. And lastly, a cost benefit analysis for paid parking, especially in the highly utilized parking areas, should be conducted to evaluate the price point that can result in transfer of vehicles parked in the highly utilized areas to lesser utilized areas. And the next slide. And with that, I thank you everyone for your time. And if there are any questions or comments at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ronak and Jamie. Are there any questions for the consultants? Okay. Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Thank you for your report. Very interesting. A couple questions. Hespeler Library. Okay, we're saying there's 44 spots there. Are you aware that some of those spots are actually leased to residents that live right there? Are you aware of that? I think you say there's 44. I'm guessing it might be 33. Okay, did anybody mention that to you?
Yes, that was noted in our study, in our field review when we went there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So you're also saying that on Sheffield Street, there's 96 spots on Sheffield Street?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's also businesses down there that are operational on a daily basis. So I would think they would, the people that work there would take those spots up. So they're not available.
So based on the utilization survey for that specific area, we saw that the utilization was there about 30 to 50% on a given weekday or weekend. So there are still, about 40 to 50 spots available on a regular basis for that parking area.
Yeah, on a weekend. Through the week, it's pretty busy. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ronak. My question just had to do with the changing nature of automobiles in parking. So if we see increasing electrification, more electric cars plugging in and actually using these spaces, not just to shop and go about daily business, but to charge their cars, will that affect the timings that you have? Will we need a little bit more parking because we're going to have electric cars parking for longer as they charge? Has that been factored into this analysis, or is it just completely irrelevant?
For this specific analysis, that was out of the scope of the study, but that is an interesting point, and I think that's something that, as the city looks into building those infrastructures to support electrification of vehicles, that should be taken into account. Those vehicles staying in the area for a longer period of time, so providing them the potential additional time that they need to stay there.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was interested in the fact that many people tend to stay overtime. And I was wondering what strategies could be used to have people move their cars. I think that's particularly on Queen Street, the ones that are right in front of the stores, and sometimes people use those inappropriately. And do you have any ways in which we could deal with that better than we're currently doing?
So in terms of the specific enforcement, I would ask the city, especially Kevin, if he has anything to add, because we're not really privy to how enforcement is conducted within that area. We were just reporting on basically what we observed during the survey, the surveys that we conducted. So in terms of whether additional enforcement and the resources for that, I would pass that to Kevin to answer in more detail.
Through the mayor to Councillor Reid, parking enforcement strategies are recommended to be reviewed as a result of this study. So some of those could be knowing that we came out of the pandemic. Parking enforcement was a little bit different, and people may be still adjusting or to the new normal that we are now. And so perhaps coaching towards compliance would be one strategy. There are other strategies of which we could use technology to help monitor valve stems and to see if they turn more as an automated process. So those are different types of strategies that I'm working with the enforcement team on trying to implement here for the city.
Do you have any rate of success of these strategies?
Through the mayor to Councillor Reid, coaching to compliance is always our first step in terms of enforcement. But looking towards these technologies, they have been used in other municipalities with success. It's about ensuring that the configuration works so that when we do utilize that technology, it's enforceable in the courts.
Thank you.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question about the duration. So Councillor Devine was talking about some folks who work there who likely will have to be able to park their car for long term. So I'm noticing in your report that the the parking allowance was only between 2 and 3 hours in most of these lots. Was there any thought given to having a long-term area where, say, non-visitors to the community, so people who are working there, can park that's close to their businesses, but not maybe directly in front, so that allows for more of outside people coming in to be customers and patrons, things like that, whereas the people who do need to have somewhere to park longer have access to a place like that as well?
So that's a really good point. And for this study, we looked at the availability of parking, especially just mostly for the visitors and residents in terms of, a quick stop and go. In terms of long-term parking needs for businesses and long-term employees, I believe the city does offer a monthly pass for the people that do require it, but outside of that, I'm not aware of any long-term parking options that the city or parking options or availability that the city may have for the tenants there.
Kevin, did you want to respond there?
Through the mayor to Councillor Roberts, long-term parking ranked as one of the lowest priorities in terms of the public survey. So the consultant didn't necessarily focus on long-term parking strategies. However, I can say that there is 12-hour free parking in the Cooper Street parking lot, and there's a limited supply of daytime residential monthly parking permits available for long-term parking. To enhance some of the long-term parking supply in the city, we can consider introducing paid parking to provide more choices for the long-term parking. We could also consider perhaps increasing the supply of monthly parking permits, but that does also come with the reducing the short-term supply. So there's going to be a bit of a balance there. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jan. My comment is basic comment based on a conversation I actually had with a business owner that I spoke with regarding this issue downtown, asking them about it and kind of expecting them to be saying, oh yeah, we need parking. And it was actually very enlightening what he said. It was basically that there's a strong need to make the existing lots just more apparent to people. There's the one that's in the figure 2 here, just to the left of Ernie's, apparently is, and you see it from the utilization, it was regularly underutilized. And I feel that, I mean, many of us know Hesper, a lot of people want to park in that little middle strip there where the utilization is at 100%. And then when, maybe when there's nothing there, they're not too clear on where to go. We have a lot by the library that, if unless people have come down there, is completely hidden. I think we maybe need to utilize the fact that if you see people coming in, I mean, if we're going to get a lot of people that don't know the area, they may be coming in from the 401 area, they're going to be passing that lot that's on the left there that's at 42%. They may be going to be going down Adam, but they're going to be passing the library lot. They're also going to be coming down Cooper, where we're passing the Cooper Street lot, all of which are approximately probably less than 50% usage. What I would like to see is actually what this business owner recommended, which is when we go to towns that maybe we're not used to, we're used to looking for those big green parking signs. And when people see that, and they're heading for downtown, they get there and see that in that 100% utilized strip that there is no parking, they will have most likely passed one of those lots with the big green parking signs, and they're going to know where they can go after. And so when I asked this as a business owner what he thought of the recommendations was that signage, along with the enforcement of those 2-hour limits downtown, so that it does become more available. So that's basically what I would like to see. My comment, based on talking with a business owner, it's there, but I agree. The signage is mentioned in your report, a very good report, and I think that would be a significant help to people visiting downtown.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so that was one of our recommendation was to improve the signage as well as just the accessibility of the parking lots that are within the study area. So that includes maybe including a billboard sign that points people to these parking areas, as well as maybe providing a real-time parking availability, number of spaces available in this lot versus that lot, and then providing direction of arrow as to how to access those lots so that people could make their decisions more efficiently, and they're not lingering in that middle strip as you alluded to find a spot. Whereas if you drive 1 minute to the other side, you can find ample parking spaces.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cooper. So staff have heard you. So I think that they'll probably take that as ongoing direction for the next steps for this. Councillor Devine?
Yes, thank you through the chair. We can beat this up all day, to be quite honest with you. Parking is an issue. Sometimes the issue is greater than others. I very rarely have gone down there and seen all the lots absolutely full. All right. The one in by the bank there, it gets well used, but I don't see it full that often. All right. Maybe on Saturday night. But as a general rule of thumb, we've got to be able to control the parking a little better, and we do need more parking. Okay, and Sheffield Street's not the spot for it, to be honest with you. I think we can, if we're creative, there's a number of things we can do. But the other thing that's very disturbing, if I was a business owner in Queen Street, I'd probably be going ballistic. People are allowed to park there all day and they don't get a ticket. Now, maybe they move their vehicle 2 feet, I have no idea. But they're not getting ticketed. That's the problem. And half of them either work in those businesses or own the businesses. Now, we have a lot on Cooper Street, a 12-hour lot in Cooper Street. Been there for years. Most time you go by, it's maybe 1 vehicle in there, 2 vehicles. It's not the best parking lot in the world. It's on a bit of a hill. It's a pain getting in and out of. Even out of your vehicle, I mean. But the there's things we can do. and we can create parking a little closer than what we've looked at. Thank you.
So I take it that's your comment for the next part of this versus a question, or,
Well, that's my
Did you have a
comment for it,
question?
because we could beat it up forever.
okay, so, but I'm just saying question, do you have a question for the delegate at all?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So Counselor Devine, you have the motion. Would you like the clerk to read that motion for you?
Counselor Earnshaw is going to read the motion for me, please. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Devine and seconded by Councillor Reed that report 22-118 CD Hespeler Village Core Area Parking Study be received. And that council endorse the findings and recommendations of the Hespeler Village Core Area Parking Study. And further, that council directs staff to include and add the parking at 10 Guelph Avenue identified in the study by on or before December 31, 2023.
I note that the motion has been changed from what had been public, and it's not going through as an amendment, so we'll accept that as the original, as a full original motion. Thank you, Councillor Devine. Are there any questions of staff here? None? Oh, Councillor Devine, you have a question of staff? Councillor Roberts, you have a question of staff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Liggett. I just had a question. I just noticed in the description that there's some grading issues there around accessibility. So what sort of undertaking would that be? Like, would it be a matter of ripping up the entire lot and having to regrade? How much work is around that? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Roberts, that would be something that we'd have to undertake to review to understand the totality of the cost, but it would involve basically a reconstruction of the area in order to achieve the grades for accessibility on that particular lot.
Okay, so I was a little bit lax in letting that go forward as without an amendment, because Councillor Reed was the seconder for it as it had been originally written. So Councillor Reed, are you comfortable with that change of that motion? And you are comfortable with Councillor, who seconded the motion for you there, Ms. Councillor Devine, was it? Did you change that too?
No, it was Councillor Reed that was shown as seconding.
Okay, so are you comfortable with that change, Councillor Reed?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will now ask the clerk to display the voting for the members, and the results of vote will follow.
Starting the voting. And closing the voting. And that carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is item 11.3.2, report 22-136-CD 201 and 217 Hesper Road official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Jangilks Inc. And we have a presentation from Rachel Green, our senior planner, providing an overview of her report. Additionally, we have the project consultant, Ms. Julianne Van Westerholt of MHPC Planning in the Zoom waiting, available to answer any questions that council may have. So welcome, Ms. Green.
Hello. Okay, there we go. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public viewing and joining us this evening. My name is Rachel Green. I'm a senior planner, and I'm here this evening to provide an overview of the proposed development at 201-217 Hespeler Road. Next slide, please. So what applications are being applied for this evening? The applicant has submitted applications for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. The official plan provides a framework to direct and manage growth within the city, and each property has a land use designation. The zoning bylaw puts each property into a zoning category which describes permitted uses and development standards. The applicant is seeking site-specific amendments to the existing official plan designation, as well as a rezoning in order to permit the development of 201 and 217 Hespeler Road for a mixed-use development. The purpose of the meeting this evening is to provide an overview of the review of the application to date and to provide a recommendation to council for their consideration prior to making a decision this evening. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a high-level overview of the planning process and where we are at to date. So the application was received in January of this year, and a public meeting was held on May 31st. And throughout this period, the application was circulated to internal staff and commenting agencies for review, including the Region of Waterloo, Grand Bridge Energy, and the Grand River Conservation Authority. No comments were received from the public at the public meeting, and no written submissions have been received to date. All comments from staff and agencies have now been addressed by the applicant, and therefore we are here this evening to provide a recommendation to council. Next slide, please. So now I'll provide an overview of the subject property. So the site is located on the east side of Hespeler Road, south of Canamera Parkway. The subject site is approximately 1.2 hectares in size with frontage on Hespeler Road. The subject lands were previously used as a car dealership and associated parking lot. The area is generally consisting of commercial and residential land uses. Another car dealership is located directly north. A low-density residential neighborhood is located to the east. An apartment building is located to the south, as well as across the street, in addition to a retirement community, as well as the YMCA and the Dumfries Conservation Area. The property is located within the Canamera Hespeler Road community node in the city's official plan, which is a mixed-use node and a regeneration area, and is also in a endorsed major transit station area. The property is designated as Hespeler Road Mixed Use Area in the official plan and is also located within the draft Hespeler Road Secondary Plan area. And the property is Zone C4 Commercial. As mentioned, the secondary plan is in a draft form and is currently being reviewed by staff to provide a more detailed policy framework for the area along the Hespeler Road corridor. Next slide, please. So I'll give you an overview of the proposal. The proposed development includes 2 towers with a shared 2-story podium. Tower A is proposed to be 17 stories and Tower B is proposed to be 13 stories, and you'll see that on the next slide. There is proposed to be a total of 321 rental units, as well as 600 square meters of commercial floor area at grade along Hespeler Road. There's a mix of 3, 2, and single bedroom units. And there's also 407 covered parking spaces within the proposed parking structure. So there's 1 level of underground and 2 levels above ground of structured parking, as well as 20 outdoor spaces. There's also 10 type A and 11 type B accessible spaces proposed as part of those spaces, as well as 100 indoor bike stalls and 23 short-term bike stalls outside. There's a shared landscape rooftop amenity area with a play structure and an enclosed social room, as well as proposed private balconies for amenity space. Staff also note that an affordable housing application has been received for the Community Improvement Plan program. This application is currently under review by the reurbanization planner, and a future report will be brought forward for council for their consideration. Next slide, please. So here is the conceptual site plan provided by the applicant. You can see that the taller 17-story tower is situated closer to Hespeler Road, and the 13-story building is situated closer to the rear of the property. There is 2 accesses to the site off of Hespeler Road, and that access road wraps around the building and provides entrance into the parking structure. Next slide, please. So an official plan amendment is required to permit the proposed development. The property is currently designated as Hespeler Road Mixed-Use Corridor, and this designation is proposed to remain. However, they are requesting site-specific provisions that would apply to this site only, and that includes an increase in the density. A max density of 3.69 FSI is requested, where the current official plan permits 2 floor space index within this community node. And as I mentioned in my earlier presentation today, the floor space index is determined by dividing the gross floor area by the lot area. And so while the floor space index is exceeding what's proposed or what's permitted in the current official plan, when we're looking at the density on a per unit or units per hectare basis, the applicant is proposing a total of 270 units per hectare, where the draft secondary plan is looking at 300 units per hectare. So this proposal is meeting that proposed policy. The applicant is also proposing a maximum height of 17 stories, where the current official plan permits 12 stories. However, the draft secondary plan is proposing a maximum height of 20 stories on this site. So the proposal is also within the proposed policies of the secondary plan. Next slide, please. A zoning bylaw amendment is also required to permit the development. The site is currently zoned C4 commercial, and therefore the applicant is proposing to add a residential RM1 permission on the property in order to permit the residential uses. The applicant is also proposing site-specific provisions to increase the density. The applicant is also proposing to reduce the commercial parking spaces from 15 spaces to 5 based on the commercial floor area. This reduction is considered minor given the location of the site within a major transit station area and its current and future access to transit. A front yard setback of 4.5 meters where 15 meters is required for the C4 zone is also being requested. A 4.5 meter setback is already permitted in the multiple residential zone. So the reduction to the commercial zone is going to allow a consistent streetscape along Hespeler Road and create a more pedestrian friendly streetscape. And lastly, the applicant is proposing a reduction in the landscaped open space from 30% to 25%. This is in part because there's a required road widening, so the lot area will be slightly reduced. However, the applicant is able to is also providing a landscape roof, which does not count towards the landscaping percentage in the bylaw because it's not located at grade. But there is sufficient buffering to the adjacent properties provided on site. So staff are also requesting that a holding provision be included in the zoning bylaw. This is to ensure that staff receive a ministry acknowledgement for a record of site condition, as well as a detailed noise study as requested by the region. And so what that means is basically there'll be a holding provision on the site until those conditions can be satisfied, and then they can be lifted. So no development will happen until those conditions are satisfied. Next slide, please. So here is a conceptual rendering of the proposed development. You can see the landscape amenity area as well as the amenity room on the 3rd floor. And then all along the frontage of Hespeler Road is the commercial area at grade. Next slide, please. And this is from the rear of the property and just shows you a different view of the proposed development. Next slide, please. So staff considered the following in reviewing the application: conformity to the provincial, regional, and local planning policies, general alignment with the draft Hespeler Road secondary plan, the general alignment of the draft major transit station area policies, compatibility with the existing surrounding development, appropriateness of the proposed height increase as well as density, the proposed record of site condition, as well as comments from council. There were no public comments received for this application, but all of staff and agency comments have been addressed at this point. Next slide, please. I'll quickly go through some of the policy considerations that staff reviewed for this application. The application aligns with the provincial, regional, and city goals with respect to intensification. It locates high-density residential within a community node, regeneration area, and secondary plan area. It contributes to the city's objective of providing a range and mix of housing options and directing 45% of new development within the built-up area. It supports existing and planned public transit networks and is located within the endorsed major transit station area. It provides an opportunity to revitalize an underutilized brownfield site. It promotes the supply of additional rental stock to meet the varying needs of residents in the city. And overall, the proposal represents good planning that contributes to the creation of complete communities with a desirable compact built form that will incorporate a high design standard. Next slide, please. For the reasons set out in the recommendation report and this presentation, it is the opinion of staff that the proposed development represents good planning, and staff recommend approval of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. And staff are of the opinion that no further public meeting is required and that the bylaws attached to the report be passed by council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Van Westerholt? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are these towers to be rental or are they to be condos, or do you know yet?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm very pleased to be here this evening. And they are intended to be entirely rental units. In fact, we have made applications for affordable housing. So the intent is to have them affordably priced as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I have a further question, if I may. Okay, okay. I'm wondering about the parking because it is in an area where transit will be readily available. Is there reduced parking in these towers and the area?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is a slight reduction in the commercial parking, but there has been sufficient parking provided for the rental units. Just simply acknowledging that the light rail transit, although proposed, has not yet been constructed. And so that in the interim, there will be sufficient parking on site provided for the units, as well as for visitors to the site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a few questions. Great presentation, by the way. One of my questions that has to do with affordable housing. Do we know the number of affordable units that will be on site, like below market?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the intent is to have the entire building affordable. And as there are a range of unit sizes and types, including 3-bedroom units, some 3-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 1-bedroom units. And I believe there's a 1-bedroom plus den option. They are entirely intended to be affordable. The rates that were given to me about a year ago when we commenced this project were within the regional range of affordability.
That's great to hear. And a follow-up question. For the back, what kind of screening would we be looking at? Like in terms of landscaping and vegetation, are you looking at any coniferous trees, for example?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe that the details of the types of landscaping are going to be worked out through the site plan process, and we haven't gotten to that stage yet. It's going to be a combination of screening that's on the building, like in order to screen the area, fencing, and some landscaping.
And another question, Madam Mayor. Thank you. What kind of building facade are we looking at? Is it cement, precast, or has that been decided yet? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe it hasn't been completely decided yet, simply because we aren't at that very fine detailed level yet. Again, that is something that will be dealt with at the site plan approval stage, which is the next phase in the process once the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments have been approved.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you, and thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. My first has to do with traffic. I'm just wondering, for residents or people parking in the building, where will they turn left to go down Hespeler Road to go to Galt's or Brantford? Because it seems like they're kind of cordoned off to go north on Hespeler. And if the LRT goes down Hespeler Road in the middle, even now you have to cut across pretty quick to get to that small kind of left turn lane on Hespeler Road. And I think the next intersection is where the YMCA and the retirement home is. So do we have a plan when half of the cars need to go south, where they're to go?
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry, Julian, you can go.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. It is my understanding that the region is going to make this a controlled access. It's a controlled access street. It's a right in, right out access at this point in time. I'm not sure if Ms. Green has some additional information that she could add to that. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's my understanding as well.
Okay, thank you. And one more question, Mayor Liggett, if I may. Thank you. I'm just curious why a few times in the document it says that there's a prohibition against geothermal wells and heating. I'm just curious why that is.
So this is a request by the region that Lisa might have further information on.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Hamilton, due to source protection and other sort of regional issues with respect to water, there are some policies that relate to the potential for geo exchange or geothermal. So I guess in this case, on this file, they have said that, but it's certainly something, there are discussions that continue in general, but on this site, that's the challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your presentation, both of you. Thanks for taking the time. Couple questions. Vehicles. How many electrical vehicle charging stations will you be having at these two buildings? What is your plan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have the specific information, but I know that there is opportunity to have electric vehicle stations roughed in and to have that available.
Okay, so at this point, you don't have a plan for how many?
No, I didn't say that. I believe there is a plan for it. I don't have the plan in front of me to answer your very specific question. It is an intent to have EV ready types of stations. And again, it's a detail that will be worked out through the site plan process.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It doesn't look like there's any more questions from council, but I have a couple. So you have an outdoor bike shelter. Do you have or bike stalls? Do you have intentions to enclose that in with a roof and a lock facility?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are 100 bicycle stalls that are enclosed and secured within the building structure. The outdoor bicycles are primarily intended for visitors to the site, so they will not be in a secured fashion. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It just concerns me because I know they're going to be stolen. So I just wanted that brought to your attention. And now I have a question to do with the heights. We're looking at the Hespeler Road secondary corridor, secondary plans. So I'm wondering why 13 and 17 stories instead of 17 and 20?
Through you, Madam Chair, this was the amount that my client was comfortable with. And it still provided over 321 units, and it met the client's pro forma for constructing this building.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps we could get a better indication from the region on the geothermal, because it sounds like there's a possibility that by what Ms. Prime was saying, that we could ask those questions again. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, certainly through site plan, we can explore some of these matters a little further. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Roberts that report 22-136-CD 201 and 217 Hespeler Road, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Jan Gilks Inc. be received. And that Cambridge Council adopts official plan amendment number 57 with site-specific policy 8.10.92 to increase the maximum density to 270 units per hectare, 3.69 floor space index, and establish a maximum height of 17 stories in height, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval. And that Cambridge Council approves the zoning bylaw amendment to amend the zoning from C4 and C4 S.4.1.37 commercial to HC4 RM1 S.4.1.432 mixed use commercial and multiple residential with a holding and site-specific provision. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that a subsequent public meeting in accordance with subsection 3417 of the Planning Act is not required. And further, that the bylaws included as Appendix A and Appendix B to report 22-136-CD be passed.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, does council have any comments? Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you. Just want to say, I think this is exactly the type of density and the affordable housing where we need it, which is right on Hespeler Road in line with major transit stations. So I'm in favor of this motion. I think it's an exciting change in that area, replacing a car lot with 321 affordable homes. That's definitely something the city can use. And it's walkable. You can get to the grocery stores, the mall, and if you're very ambitious, you can even walk to Galt, which is fantastic. So I'm fully in favor of the motion. I look forward to seeing what staff and the developers do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. To reiterate Councillor Hamilton's words, I'm really excited. I actually bought a car from this lot when it used to be a car place many moons ago. And so I'm really excited to see something developed here. To reiterate some of my earlier comments, I really want to ensure that some barrier-free accessible units are included in these types, especially when it's going to be all affordable, which is really exciting and refreshing to hear. So when we get to that stage, when we're at site plan, I would love to see some more of the internal plans and ensuring that there's accessible units included. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. I had forgotten that it had been a car lot, and how amazing is that we're exchanging cars for people who need affordable housing. That's just amazing. We've come so far with this particular project. I will now ask the clerk to display, we're going to call for the vote, and I'll ask the clerk to display the voting for the members, and the results of the vote will follow.
Opening the voting. and closing the voting. And that carries unanimously.
So the next item on the agenda is item 11.3.3, Report 22-139 CD, Recommendation Report 359 Lawrence Street, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, Lowland Lawrence Street Holdings Limited, care of Evan Whitman, GSP Group, Inc. And joining us this evening is Michael Campos, our intermediate planner, providing an overview of his report, as well as the project consultant, Mr. Evan Whitman from GSP Group, Inc., joining us virtually to provide a presentation. Welcome, Mr. Campos.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, senior staff, and members of the public viewing today. My name is Michael Campos, and I'm a planner with the City of Cambridge. I'm here today to present our recommendation relating to our zoning bylaw amendment application submitted for 359 Lawrence Street. Next slide, please. So I wanted to quickly begin with a brief explanation of the application that was applied by the applicant for this site. The applicant has applied for a zoning bylaw amendment, or a ZBA application. The city zoning bylaw is intended to implement the policies and objectives provided through the city's official plan. And so the zoning bylaw applies a zone category to each parcel of land in the city and provides details on what uses can or cannot be accommodated on a site. Additionally, minimum development standards are associated to each zone that are required to be met when proposing a new development or altering an existing development. And so an amendment can be submitted to the city requesting a rezoning of the lands from one zone category to another, for example, from commercial to residential, or to request changes to the minimum development standards for the site. And so provisions such as setbacks, parking, amenity area are other examples of provisions that can be amended. And a zoning bylaw amendment can be submitted at any time by a property owner. And so in this case, the proposed development is in conformity to the official plan and does not require an amendment. And through the recently enacted Bill 23, which received royal assent at the end of November, a site plan application will no longer be necessary as the proposed development consists of less than 10 units, which means that a building permit application would be the only remaining process to complete before construction could commence if approval is issued today. Site plan applications will only be required for developments proposing 10 or more units moving forward. Next slide, please. And so in terms of our timeline, the application has gone through the typical review process. The application was received on December 14th, 2021, and presented at a public meeting on March 22nd, 2022. It subsequently went through a review process by city staff and outside agencies, where comments were received from circulation and were addressed by the applicant. And no comments were actually received by members of the public regarding this application. And so today we are presenting the staff recommendation on the zoning bylaw amendment before you. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located approximately 300 meters northeast of the Preston Court area. The site is bounded by Lawrence Street to the north and Mildred Street to the east. The site has a total lot area of approximately 0.147 hectares and is currently developed with an existing one-story office building. Residential uses generally surround the subject lands, along with some service commercial uses and recreational community amenities. The city official plan designates the site as low/medium density residential, which permits a range of residential uses. And the site is also identified as being within a regeneration area, which are areas within the city where a transition of use from one use, such as commercial or industrial, to another use, such as residential, is anticipated and encouraged. The site is presently zoned C2O, which is a commercial zone in the city zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So I'll provide a brief overview of the proposed development. The applicant is proposing to develop the subject property with 6 two-story street fronting townhome dwellings. Each individual unit is proposed to be accessed via individual driveways off of Lawrence Street and will be provided with 1 private garage per unit, which can accommodate 1 vehicle. An additional parking space is provided in the access driveway of each unit. Each unit will be identical in layout, having a total gross floor area of 1,400 square feet, excluding the basement level. The 2 end units are slightly larger, being approximately 70 square feet larger than the 4 middle units, and the units are all intended to provide 3 bedrooms. Each unit will have access to a private amenity area to the rear of the unit, and the proposed backyards range in depth from 10.7 meters up to 13.4 meters. The applicant has also proposed landscaping along the rear property lines, the Mildred Street frontage, and along the front patios. Next slide, please. And so this is the site concept plan that was submitted as part of the application. And as you can see, the proposed lots will front onto Lawrence Street, with each unit having its own individual driveway access. And the proposed development is similar to existing development immediately to the rear of this property. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an illustration of the proposed building elevation if viewing the property from Lawrence Street. This view displays the two-story townhouse units with each having an individual entrance and garage. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the subject lands are designated by the city's official plan as low/medium density residential, as well as being identified as being within a regeneration area. And as such, townhouse development is permitted up to a maximum density of 75 units per hectare. The proposed development is planned to have a total density of 40.5 units per hectare, resulting in it being in conformity with the official plan. In order to facilitate the development of the proposed street fronting townhouse units, the applicant was required to submit a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the lands from the commercial zone to the multiple residential RM4 zone, which will permit the requested residential uses. The applicant is also seeking to establish site-specific provisions to facilitate the proposed design. And these include to permit an exterior side yard setback of 4 meters, whereas a minimum of 6 meters is required by the bylaw. To permit an interior side yard setback of 2 meters, whereas a minimum of 3 meters is required. To permit a maximum lot coverage of 45%, whereas a maximum of 40% is permitted, and to permit the minimum distance of an access driveway to the intersection of any two streetlines to be 7.3 meters, whereas a minimum of 7.5 meters is required. Next slide, please. And so the following are the considerations that were taken in preparing our recommendation report. So in addition to the consistency and conformity to the applicable provincial, regional, and local planning legislation, consideration was also had for land use compatibility with the surrounding existing development and the overall character of the existing neighborhood. Appropriateness of the proposed site-specific zoning requests associated with the proposed development, and comments that were received from members of council, public and city staff, and agency circulation. Next slide, please. And so as part of our review of the proposed development for the lands against applicable planning policies, we concluded that the proposed development supports healthy and livable communities due to its location and complementing mix of uses. It provides for gentle intensification within a regeneration area and existing low density residential neighborhood, and is within walking distance of the Preston core area. It accommodates forecasted residential growth by introducing additional housing units and helps support policy that directs 45% of new development to the built-up area. Finally, the site was determined to be transit supportive. It exhibits qualities that support a complete community, which is a common objective across provincial, regional, and local planning policy. And the application represents good planning that contributes to the creation of the complete community with a high standard of design, provides an opportunity to develop an underutilized property in a mature residential neighborhood with similar residential uses. It also contributes to the creation of attainable housing and provides a desirable built form that complements the existing character of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And so the staff recommendation is as displayed on the screen. That report 22-139 CD recommendation report for 359 Lawrence Street zoning bylaw amendment, lowland Lawrence Street Holdings, care of Evan Whitman GSP Group, be received. That Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial C2O to the residential RM4 zone with site-specific 4.1.433 to facilitate the development of 6 street fronting townhouse units. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirements for a public meeting in accordance with subsection 3417 of the Planning Act has been satisfied, and further that the bylaw attached to this report be passed. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. If there are any members of the community that wish to reach out with any questions, my contact information is provided. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campos. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Are there any questions for Mr. Whitman? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Whitman has a presentation tonight. So if Mr. Whitman could come on board here and we'll have that presentation.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Oh, there's a presentation. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Evan Whitman, a land use planner with GSP Group, presenting on behalf of Lowland Lawrence Street Holdings for the ZBA application for 359 Lawrence Street. I will keep this presentation quite brief, just reiterate a few key points from Michael's presentation. He did a great job providing information on the application. Hopefully I can go quickly enough to get everyone home to catch the end of the Leafs game. Next slide, please. So as indicated, the submission was put in almost exactly a year ago to the day. This application included a variety of technical studies required by the city, which underwent a review and were accepted as meeting all the technical requirements for the application. Next slide, please. The statutory public meeting was held March 22nd, where both the city and myself provided information and overview of the application and answered any questions that were presented at the time. I'll just note that no members of the public made a delegation or submitted written comments for the application. Next slide, please. As observed on the image, the site is largely underutilized and is an excellent location for gentle intensification, especially considering the proximity to downtown Preston and the regeneration area designation of the official plan. Next slide, please. So this slide and the following we saw in Michael's presentation, where we're demonstrating the plan for the site, which is bringing 6 residential units, freehold in structure in a townhouse built form to the site. You can see pretty large backyards, front yards, and they're good sized units to put together a livable unit that's a bit more attainable for people that might be new or looking forward to getting into the housing market. Next slide, please. And here's just a quick image of what we're proposing to build on this site. As mentioned, these will be freehold in structure. Next slide, please. And just to quickly reiterate, as indicated in the staff report, the application is consistent with and in conformity to the provincial policy statement, growth plan, region, and city official plans. The change in land use to residential is appropriate, as well as the requested site-specific amendments, and we are supportive of the staff recommendation. Next slide, please. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Whitman? Thank you, by the way, Mr. Whitman.
Welcome.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. It was great and the development looks really lovely. I would just like a little bit of clarification around what you're deeming attainable. So I've heard this term sort of in different developments, and I'm just curious what attainable means in this application.
So for this application, I guess the main differentiator is between things like, say, market housing or affordable housing. Attainable is looking at something that is a more affordable option in terms of people looking at getting into the housing market. So them being townhouse built forms, they're not as much land or as much house as, say, a single detached or a semi-detached. So it presents another option that's a little bit more affordable than other housing options for people looking to get into the housing market.
Are there any other questions? None? Okay. Councillor Kimpson, you have the motion. Would you like to read it in its entirety?
Certainly. Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Leggett. Recommendation report 22-139-CD 359 Lawrence Street zoning bylaw amendment, Lowland Lawrence Street Holdings Limited, care of Evan Whitman, GSP Group, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Earnshaw. Recommendation that report 22-139-CD, recommendation report 359 Lawrence Street zoning bylaw amendment, Lowland Lawrence Street Holdings, care of Evan Whitman, GSP Group, be received. And that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial C2 bracket O or 0 to the residential RM4 section 4-1-4 0.33 to facilitate the development of 6 street-facing townhouse units, and that Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirement for a public meeting in accordance with subsection 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act has been satisfied, and further that the bylaw attached to this report be passed.
Thank you, Councillor Kimson. Does anybody have any questions of staff? Seeing none, are there any comments from council? Thank you. Councillor Kimson?
Mayor Liggett, I'd like to speak to this. This is a great location for an infill project in Ward 3. It is close to schools, transit, recreation, shopping. I'm very pleased to see this in our community. It's really great because the community provides a range of activities for people at all stages in life, from all the schools that are close by with children to the Ellen Reuter Center. And also having some more people will hopefully support our core area businesses as well. So I'm certainly pleased to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Devine?
Yes, Madam Mayor. After this, can we have a quick break, please? Thank you.
Yes, we can, for sure. So I will now ask the clerk to display the voting for members, and the results of the vote will follow.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
So we're going to take a 5-minute break. The next item on the agenda is item number 11.3.4, Report 22-131-CD, Recommendation Report 1418 Duke Street, OPA and ZBA 2530103, Ontario, Inc., care of MHBC Planning. Mr. Campos, I see you're up again. You will provide us with an overview of your report, I understand. But there is also a minor change in the bylaw of your report and that you will address this in your presentation. Additionally, the consultant for the project, Mr. Trevor Hawkins from MHBC Planning, is in the Zoom waiting room available to answer any questions council may have. Welcome, Michael. Go ahead.
Thank you. Once again, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, senior staff, and members of the public viewing today. My name is Michael Campos, and I'm a planner with the city. I'm here today to present our recommendation relating to the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications for 1418 Duke Street. Next slide, please. And so like my previous presentation, I wanted to begin with a little bit of an explanation of the applications that were applied for today. The applicant has applied for an official plan amendment, or an OPA, which is applied for when a change is needed to the city's official plan to facilitate a development on a site that is not fully in conformity to the existing permissions. So an application can be submitted at any time by the owner of a property who wishes to amend the policies of the official plan with regard to their property. And generally, these changes take the form of changes to the uses that are permitted or to permit higher forms of density on the site, which is measured in units per hectare and by floor space index, or FSI for short. Amendments to the official plan can also be initiated by the city when there is a need to replace or revise policies or mapping. And so I'll provide a bit of an explanation for the proposed amendment relating to this site further in my presentation. The applicant has also applied for a zoning bylaw amendment application that seeks to rezone the lands and to establish new site-specific provisions. And they have also recently submitted a site plan approval application, which is now being processed by city planning staff. The purpose of this application is to review the site design and technical aspects of items such as building design, site layout, engineering, and landscaping, among other matters. A site plan application can only be approved once a proposal is deemed to be in conformity with the official plan and zoning bylaw. And as such, an OPA or ZBA will always be the first planning process ahead of a site plan if it is required. Next slide, please. So similarly, in terms of our timeline, the application has gone through the same review process. The application was received on December 22nd, 2021, and presented at public meeting on March 22nd, 2022. It subsequently went through a review process by city staff and outside agencies, where comments received from this circulation were addressed by the applicant. And again, no comments were received by members of the public regarding this application. So today we are now presenting the staff recommendation on the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment presented to you today. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located approximately 500 meters southeast of the Preston Core area, and this site is bounded by Duke Street and Bishop Street North and is located immediately at the corner of their intersection. The site has a total lot area of approximately 0.282 hectares and is currently vacant. The property is generally flat and has been previously disturbed such that a large gravel area comprises most of the site, with small amounts of vegetation located around the perimeter. The city official plan designates the site as low/medium density residential, which permits a range of residential uses. The site is also identified as being within a regeneration area, which, as I explained earlier, are areas within the city where a transition of use from one use, such as commercial, to another use such as residential is anticipated and encouraged. This site is presently zoned CS5, which is a commercial zone in the city's zoning bylaw. The site is also subject to a site-specific provision relating to local shopping center uses. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to develop the subject property with a three and a half story townhouse building containing a total of 28 stacked townhouse units. Each unit is proposed to be self-contained with internal stairs. The proposed development will provide each unit with access to one parking space on a surface parking lot and will include 5 visitor spaces. A total of 33 parking spaces are proposed for the site. An outdoor amenity space is also proposed to the rear of the building or west side of the building and is intended to have a space that is sheltered from adjacent streets and that provides for a passive gathering space for residents of the building. Next slide, please. And so as can be seen on your screen, the proposed building is located on the eastern side of the site with pedestrian entrances facing Bishop Street North. Access to the subject property is planned off of Duke Street. This access is meant to act as both an ingress and egress access, and there's no proposed vehicular access to Bishop Street North from the site. And so staff have received yesterday an adjustment to the site plan that is not currently shown on the screen. The electrical consultant is proposing a small extension to the building fronting Duke Street that is proposed to be used as an electrical metering room for the building. And this small extension is approximately 2.8 meters by 3.8 meters and will extend slightly into the required front yard setback. And so as a result of this change to the building, a revision to the bylaw provided with a recommendation report was required and has been updated by clerks. And I've been notified that it is highlighted in your copy of the bylaw. I will touch on the additional provision that has been added to the bylaw a little further in my presentation. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an illustration of the proposed building elevation if viewing the building from Bishop Street North. This view displays the pedestrian entrances to the townhouse building that extend to the property line. Next slide, please. The second elevation is a view from the west or to the rear of the building from the parking area. And this side will have balconies and windows facing the parking area. Next slide, please. And so in order to facilitate the development of the proposed 3.5-story residential building, the applicant was required to submit applications for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, as I had described earlier. The lands are designated low/medium density residential, but are also located within a regeneration area, which permits a maximum density of 75 units per hectare. The official plan amendment is required to facilitate the proposed increase in allowable density on the subject lands from the maximum of 75 units per hectare to 105 units per hectare. And so the intent of the regeneration area is to allow the intensification of residential uses to occur in areas that can and should accommodate residential growth. Although the density proposed surpasses the maximum density permitted by the official plan, it maintains conformity with the maximum floor space index, which is a maximum of 2.0. And as well as height requirements in the regeneration area, which is allows for a maximum of 8 stories. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal introduces increased density within a low-rise stacked townhouse building, and that can successfully be accommodated on the site and is compatible and consistent with existing development in the area. Next slide, please. A zoning bylaw amendment application is also required in order to rezone the subject lands from the current commercial CS5 zone with a site-specific provision to the multiple residential RM2 zone with a holding provision, which will allow the development of the proposed stacked townhouse built form once a record of site condition is received to the satisfaction of the Region of Waterloo. In addition to rezoning the lands, the applicant is also seeking to establish site-specific provisions for the lands, which include the following: to permit a minimum interior side yard setback of 3 meters, to permit a minimum common amenity area of 8.2 square meters per unit, to permit a visitor parking rate of 0.15 parking spaces per unit, whereas 0.25 parking spaces per unit is required. And this change results in a total reduction of 2 parking spaces, 2 visitor parking spaces. And as mentioned earlier, due to the requested minor extension of the building for a metering room, an additional provision will be required to permit the front yard setback to the extension of the building containing the electrical metering room to 1.88 meters, whereas a minimum front yard setback of 4.5 meters is required. And so this reduced setback would only be permitted for the proposed extension and not the balance of the northern building face. It would just be to that extension. Next slide, please. And so the following are the considerations that were taken in preparing the recommendation report. So in addition to the consistency and conformity to the applicable provincial, regional, and local planning legislation, consideration was also had for land use compatibility with the surrounding existing development, as well as the overall character of the existing neighborhood, appropriateness of the proposed site-specific zoning requests, source water protection, and comments received from council, the public, and agency circulation. Next slide, please. So as part of our review of the proposed development for the lands, we concluded that the site supports healthy and livable communities, complements a mix of uses, and its promotion of encouragement of use of different modes of transportation. It locates a higher form of density within a regeneration area and within walking distance of the Preston Core area. It accommodates forecasted residential growth by introducing a range of housing units and helps support policy that directs 45% of new development to the built-up area. As well, it conforms with locational criteria for multi-unit residential development. Finally, this site was also determined to be transit supportive. It exhibits qualities that support a complete community and the application represents good planning that contributes to the creation of the complete community with a high standard of design. It provides an opportunity to develop a longstanding vacant property in a prime location that supports walkability. Next slide, please. And so the staff recommendation is as displayed on the screen, that the recommendation report for 1418 Duke Street be received, that Cambridge Council adopts the proposed official plan amendment to permit a maximum allowable density of 105 units per hectare within the low/medium density residential designation applied to the subject lands through site-specific policy number 58, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval, and that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial CS5 site-specific 4.1.100 to the multiple residential RM2 zone with site-specific provision for S.4.1.434 to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, common amenity area, visitor parking rate, and an increased maximum projection of a staircase into a required yard. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirements for a public meeting in accordance with the subsection 3417 of the Planning Act have been satisfied, and further that the bylaws attached to this report be passed. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm glad to take them. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hawkins, who is in the waiting room? Okay, and we will ask questions of staff after the motion is on the floor. So Councillor Kimpson, you have the motion. Could you please read it in its?
Thank you, Mayor Leggett. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Reid. Recommendation that report 22-131-CD, recommendation report 1418 Duke Street, OPA and ZBA -2530103 Ontario Inc., care of MHBC Planning, be received, and that Cambridge Council adopts the proposed official plan amendment to permit a maximum allowable density of 105 units per hectare within the low-medium density residential designation applied to the subject lands through site-specific policy number 58, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval, and that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial CS5, section 4.1.100 to the multiple residential -H RM2 zone with site-specific provisions S.4.1.434 to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, common amenity area, visitor parking rate, and an increased maximum projection of a staircase into a required yard, as well as a holding provision. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirements for a public meeting in accordance with subsection 34(17) of the Planning Act have been satisfied. And further, that the bylaws attached to this report be passed.
Just hold on one second because the full motion isn't there, Councillor Kimpson. We're going to have the clerk read the correct motion. Sorry, apologies there, Councillor Kimpson, that you were put in this position. It's just an error in what you received.
Okay, moved by Councillor Kimpson, seconded by Councillor Reed, that report 22131 CD, recommendation report 1418 Duke Street, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 2530103, Ontario Inc., care of MHBC Planning be received. And the Cambridge Council adopts the proposed official plan amendment to permit a maximum allowable density of 105 units per hectare within the low medium density residential designation applied to the subject lands through site-specific policy number 58, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval. And that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial CS5 S41100 to the multi-residential HRM2 zone with site-specific provisions S41434 to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, common amenity area, visitor parking rate, and an increased maximum projection of a staircase into a required yard, as well as a holding provision. That report 22131 CD, recommendation report 1418 Duke Street, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 2530103, Ontario Inc., care of MHBC Planning be received. And the Cambridge Council adopts the proposed official plan amendment to permit a maximum allowable density of 105 units per hectare within the low medium density residential designation applied to the subject lands through site-specific policy number 58, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval. And the Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial CS5 S41100 to multi-residential HRM2 zone with site-specific provisions S41434 to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, common amenity area, visitor parking rate, and an increased maximum projection of a staircase into a required yard, as well as holding provision.
So all is not good in the world and balance. So we're just going to take a 2-minute break because there seem to be some repetitive parts. So let's just get this right and then we'll vote on it if you don't mind. Just a couple of minutes. this and read it. It's all good.
To summarize what happened, Councillor Kimpson's initial motion that she read out was correct. We apologize. We were reading something different and thought something went wrong. So we thought you were missing information, but I'm going to repeat the motion that you initially read, Councillor Kimpson. So again, I apologize. Moved by Councillor Kimpson, seconded by Councillor Reid, that report 22131 CD, recommendation report 1418 Duke Street, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 2530103, Ontario Inc., care of MHBC Planning be received, and the Cambridge Council adopts the proposed official plan amendment to permit a maximum allowable density of 105 units per hectare within the low medium density residential designation applied to the subject lands through site-specific policy number 58, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Region of Waterloo for approval. And the Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from commercial CS5 S41100 to the multi-residential HRM2 zone with site-specific provision S41434 to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, common amenity area, visitor parking rate, and an increased maximum projection of a staircase into a required yard, as well as holding provision. And the Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirements for a public meeting in accordance with subsection 3417 of the Planning Act have been satisfied, and further that the bylaws attached to this report be passed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Councillor Kimpson. And now that everybody knows this one off by heart, are there any questions for staff? Does council have any comments? Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leggett. And certainly now that we're all clear on the motion, we can move forward with comments. Again, I'm very pleased with this particular development in this location. It's very central, and it's a great spot to have people. The one thing, and I'm not sure if it's something that we could suggest, but if there's any way that the developer could be very clear to anyone who's interested in purchasing the units to remind them that the railway tracks that they see with the large gates and signals are not for show, and that they are in fact active, because we do get a number of people who are concerned about the sound of train whistles. If that could just be somehow mentioned or brought up, that would be fantastic.
No more comments, I guess, here. So I'll ask the clerk to display the voting for members, and the results of the vote will follow.
And starting the voting. And closing the voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is item number 11.3.5, report 22-145-CD sign variance S12/22-60 Main Street. Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Could you kindly read it in its entirety?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Urmeta that report 22-145-CD sign variance S12/22-60 Main Street be received, and that application S12/22 be approved to permit 2 illuminated projecting signs in the Galt Core area as outlined in this report.
Read the next one.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Are there any questions for staff? Any comments? Okay, well, I'm going to make a comment. This has been a long time coming for this restaurant bar downtown. I think it's pretty exciting. So to get to the point where we're at the sign stage, that's amazing. And I'm so looking forward to this being downtown and it becoming a more vibrant downtown. The proprietor for this entity has a long track record in other communities for what they do and high quality. So this is exciting. I will ask the clerk to display, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you done? I will ask the clerk to display voting for members and the results of the vote will follow.
And starting voting. And closing voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is item 11.3.6, report 22-146-CD sign variance S4/22 18 Tannery Street East. Councillor Devine, you have the motion. Would you like the clerk to read the motion on your behalf?
Moved by Councillor Devine, seconded by Councillor Cooper, recommendation that report 22-146 CD sign variance S4/22 18 Tannery Street East be received and that application S4/22 be approved to permit an illuminated freestanding sign in the Hespeler Village core area as outlined in the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Any comments? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to display voting for members and the results of the vote will follow.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is item number 11.5.1 22-032-0 OCM Cambridge 50th celebration update. We have our Director of Communications, Julie Kalfleisch, providing a presentation, a very exciting one.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Liggett, members of council, staff, and members of the public. I'm here tonight to give an update to the presentation that I gave on November 29th regarding the Cambridge 50th, as well as the Civic Pride communication strategy. Since our last meeting, I've had a chance to connect with most of you and go over the communications plan in greater detail, which has been really beneficial, and I appreciate your time. We've taken your feedback, and now I want to walk you through some of the changes that we've made. Next slide. So here we have version 1 on the left and version 2 on the right. So what you can see in version 2 is that we've taken the feedback around contrast and color usage. We've also added in Riverside Park so that we have a complete representation within this graphic. If you want to go to the next slide, we also have version 3, which the farmers market at the top of the zero, we reduced the size of it, which was a request to have a look at it in that way. So essentially version 2 and version 3 are quite similar with the exception of the farmers market graphic. And overall, through our conversations, I think that we were able to get to a place where we have something that everyone can work with. I'm hoping. On the right is an example of how this can be applied on one of the street banners. And what I want to draw your attention to is something that came out of the discussions on Friday. The tagline, which is currently, or what has currently been discussed, is bridging history since 1973. But through conversations on Friday, actually, Councillor Kimson suggested bridging community since 1973. And luckily, that was our first meeting of the day, so I was able to discuss with most of you. And I think it makes more sense for this campaign and an initiative. Community has two meanings. So, of course, bridging the community, the four communities that joined together in 1973, but also the feeling of community, which is something we're really trying to get at through the Civic Pride initiative. Next slide, please. So this is just the overview of all the different areas that we've captured in our great city. Next slide. So we have a number of examples of swag. You can move to the next slide. Just to see the application. The idea has always been that starting in January, we'll want to paint the town 50. And so we need to be putting this visual identity on all kinds of things in order to do that. We're hoping people will go out shopping with their 50th totes if we decide to produce those, and you know, mugs and things like that. Just fun things that will help us to celebrate the 50th and really get it out there in the community in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. So this is an example of how this campaign has legs. So for me, I need to use this visual identity for an entire year, which is why we needed to have something that was robust and able to be used in a variety of ways. So in this example, you can see where elements of the 50th graphic have been brought into these social media panels in order to deliver the idea that, you know, this is a 50th message and this is our 50th year and there's something special we're trying to communicate, but also, you know, it kind of brings it across in a more subtle way, which will be really helpful for my communications team. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of how this look could be interpreted on social media. So on the left, we have our Facebook profile, and on the right are some examples of how we can bring the look and feel into our Instagram feed so that, again, people see something special is going on next year. Next slide. So here are the celebration pop-up banners. So this is another example. We use different images just to get an idea across that these would be used at any 50th event next year. So even if you yourselves have events going on in the community, you can connect with my team to talk about creating banners for those types of events. So Councillor Roberts and I talked about your public engagement events, and maybe you want to create one of these to bring to your events over the next year. And I think that's the last slide. Yes.
Does anybody have any questions for Julie? Nope, I've got some comments though. Thank you so much for incorporating, sitting with each of us and incorporating all of our thoughts and ideas. I think we've got a couple of really good selections here. So I certainly appreciate that, Julie, but I don't see anything here for us to choose between 2 and 3. And I'd really like to have a consensus with council tonight on going forward. And it sounds like version 3 would be it. So if everybody wants to comment on that, and then we could just go forward with that after tonight. Councillor Cooper.
This is, are you going to hate me for this? This is maybe this me being a grammar freak, being English. My initial thought was Bridging Communities. Should it be Bridging Communities?
Like it. We did discuss that, but we're trying to play on the sense of community. And I think that it's a better way to go. I understand what you're saying. I'm an English grad as well. Yeah. So I would prefer to go with community so that it's more future oriented as well, that we're not talking about the separate communities anymore. We're talking about us all moving forward together.
I did feel you put some thought into that, and it's you did a good job. I mean, I saw the changes made, adding Peston and the extra contrast. It has made a difference. Good job.
Thank you.
Just to mention that it did go out to the community, I believe, for the one that the college worked on, right? Yes, so we did do some consultation there. Councillor Roberts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Liggett. Great job. I think it looks wonderful. I just want to commend you on the punched up contrast, I think is going to lend itself a lot better in terms of accessibility. So I think that looks great. And I really like the third version. I think that having the farmer's market kind of close to the river there, I think makes sense in terms of the placement, and it looks really good. So great job.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you. And thank you very much, Julie, and to your team and to everyone that commented on this. I know when we met last time, we discussed the difficulty of coming up with one symbol or image to capture the diversity that is the Cambridge mosaic. But I think this is a great job. It captures the entire community and brings it together in one unifying logo that we can all share in. So hats off to you and your team. I think it's great.
So is everybody okay with direction for version number 3? Yes? Okay, there we go. That was easy. Thank you so much, Julie. Really, really appreciated that in our time sitting together. Thank you. Yeah. Put off my thing. So now will ask the clerk to put the vote on the screen.
Opening the voting. And closing the voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is item number 11.5.2, 22-034 OCM update and revised information, Cambridge and North Dumfries Energy Plus Inc., Energy Plus and Brantford Power Inc., BPI, merger participation agreement, closing, adjusting documents, and share redemption. Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Kindly read the motion in its entirety.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Reid that report number 22-034-OCM, update and revised information, Cambridge and North Dumfries Energy Plus Inc., bracket Energy Plus, and Brantford Power Inc., bracket BPI, merger participation agreement, closing adjustment documents, and share redemption be received. And that the resolution as adopted by council at their meeting of September 27, 2022 be rescinded. And that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the notice of redemption as those terms are defined in section 2.6 of the duly executed merger participation agreement attached as Appendix C to redeem 921 Class A special shares from Grandbridge Corporation for the retraction price of $203 per share for a total valuation of $186,963. And further, that upon receipt of the funds through the notice of redemption, that the chief financial officer be authorized to transfer the amount of $186,963 to the Hydro Dividend Stabilization Reserve Fund.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Are there any questions for staff? Does council have any comments? Okay, I will now ask clerk to display voting for members, and the results of the vote will follow.
And starting voting. And closing voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
So we now move into that portion of the agenda where we have notices of motion, and Councillor Cooper is providing notice of motion this evening. Council will have the opportunity to discuss the proposed motion during our council meeting on January 31st, 2023. Councillor Cooper, you have the motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Of Waterloo's downtown Cambridge truck diversion study is considering the impacts of diverting trucks from the downtown Cambridge area. Whereas it is expected that regional staff will be providing recommendations regarding the downtown Cambridge truck diversion study to Regional Council in early 2023. Whereas the downtown Cambridge truck diversion study has identified the potential for additional heavy trucks along other regional roads as a result of the downtown Cambridge heavy through truck traffic restriction. Whereas Cambridge City Council supports the region's immediate implementation of a heavy through truck traffic restriction in the downtown Cambridge area along Ward Street and Ainsley Street. Therefore, be it resolved that subsequent to the implementation of the downtown Cambridge area heavy through truck traffic restriction, the region review and consider further truck diversion strategies to mitigate additional heavy through truck traffic on Concession Street. And further, that a copy of this motion be sent to the Council of the Region of Waterloo and all regional municipalities within the region.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I don't think we're going for comments because this is just a notice of motion, correct? Yes. So we will ask clerk to display voting for member. Oh, no, we don't do that either. Sorry. It's just on my reading material here, so we're just going to disregard that. Oh, wow. That concludes our regular agenda for this evening. Is there any other business? Did Sherry have a notice? Right. Okay, no other business. Motion to receive correspondence and presentations. The following motion is related to items of correspondence and presentations at council. And I recommend that each of you read these because you will find things that other communities are doing. And there's some pretty interesting stuff that we may not be aware of and we may want to implement in our own community. So I've always taken the time over the years to read that and know what others in the province are doing. Councillor Roberts, you have the motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine. The recommendation that all presentations and correspondence from the December 13th, 2022 council meeting be received.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Does council have any comments? Okay, I will ask clerk to display voting for members and the results of the vote will follow.
It's starting voting. And ending voting. And that motion carries unanimously.
Next up on the agenda is the consideration of bylaws. Please note that bylaw 22-080 has been amended to include the following additional wording. The front yard setback to the extension of the building containing the electrical metering room shall be 1.88 meters. Councillor Roberts, you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Cooper. The recommendation that the following bylaws listed under the heading of introduction and consideration of bylaws be enacted and passed. 22-072 being a bylaw to dedicate certain lands as public highway, equestrian way. 22-073 being a bylaw to exempt certain lots or blocks pursuant to subsection 55 of the planning, 50(5) of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 as amended, part lot control exemption, 270, 280, and 290 Equestrian Way. 22-074 being a bylaw to exempt certain lots or blocks pursuant to subsection 50(5) of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 as amended, part lot control exemption, block 9, 10, and 13 on registered plan 58M-686. 22-075 being a bylaw to provide for a 2023 interim tax levy and for the payment of 2023 interim taxes. 22-076 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 57 to the City of Cambridge Official Plan 2012 as amended, 201 and 217 Hespeler Road. 22-077 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 150-85 as amended with respect to land municipally known as 201 and 217 Hespeler Road. 22-078 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 150-85 as amended with respect to land municipally known as 359 Lawrence Street. 22-079 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 58 to the City of Cambridge Official Plan 2012 as amended 1418 Duke Street. And 22-080 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 150-85 as amended with respect to land municipally known as 1418 Duke Street.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. That was a long one. I will now ask the clerk to display voting for members, and the results of the vote will follow.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Okay, confirmatory bylaw, and Councillor Roberts, you have this one as well. Can you please read it in its entirety?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Earnshaw. The recommendation that bylaw 22-081 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge be passed.
We'll go to voting now.
And starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
We've now reached the end of the agenda, and it's one that Councillor Roberts does not have. So Councillor Reid, you have the motion for our close of meeting. Would you like the clerk to read the motion for you?
No, I'll read it. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kinson that this council meeting does now adjourn at 9:03 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And now we will go straight to voting.
And starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
So thank you to everyone involved for your time and your exceptional patience tonight and your contribution.